There is a doorway in Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home in Charlottesville, Virginia. The house was completed in 1809 after 40 years of continuous construction, revision, and refinement. The doorway stands 9 feet tall. The threshold is cut from local stone. The frame is planed white oak. Jefferson recorded its dimensions in his household memoranda, now archived at the Library of Congress in Washington. 9 feet. Thomas Jefferson was 6 feet 2.5 inches tall. He was considered extraordinarily large for his era and noted it himself in correspondence. He stood above nearly every man he shared a room with. The average American man in 1800 stood 5 feet 7 inches. The average American woman stood 5 feet 2. Jefferson was the outlier. His guests were ordinary. His household staff was ordinary. His family was ordinary. The door was built for all of them. The door is 9 feet tall. Jefferson's head cleared it by 14 inches. The head of an average visitor in 1800 cleared it by 29 inches. The head of an average woman cleared it by 34 inches. No one in that house needed 34 inches of clearance above their skull. No one needed 29. No one even needed the 14 that Jefferson himself required. The door is still there. You can drive to Charlottesville today and stand under it. The measurement has not changed. The gap between the top of your head and the top of that door frame is, depending on your height, somewhere between 2 and 3 feet of empty air. It has always been somewhere between 2 and 3 feet. It was built that way deliberately, sheared by a man who calculated the optimal angle of a plow blade and wrote it in a letter. No one has ever formally explained why. Historians will tell you this is about proportion, and they are right to say so. The accepted explanation for oversized doorways in pre-industrial formal architecture rests on the Palladian tradition, and the tradition is real. Andrea Palladio, the 16th century Italian architect, whose treatise I Quattro Libri dell'Architettura became the foundational text of Western residential design, prescribed specific mathematical relationships between every element of a room. Ceiling height, window width, door height, each was derived from the others by ratio. A room with a 14-foot ceiling, in the Palladian system, required a door of approximately 9 feet 4 inches to achieve visual harmony. The door was not sized to the person. The door was sized to the room. This account has appeared in every architectural history textbook for over a century. It is taught in every accredited architecture program in the United States and across Europe. It is cited by the curators at Monticello itself in the written materials distributed at the entrance. That entrance, the 9-foot one. The National Park Service's Historic American Building Survey, the most comprehensive archive of pre-industrial American construction in existence, consistently attributes oversized door heights to Palladian proportion. The explanation is not incorrect. The ratio works. The ceiling is 14 feet. 2/3 of 14 is 9 1/3. Jefferson built 9 feet. The arithmetic checks out. Historians who cite proportion are citing real geometry. The Palladian tradition is documented and directly applicable. The explanation is sound, as far as it goes. But stand inside that door. Walk slowly through the entrance hall of Monticello. Stop before you reach the parlor. Turn around, look up at the frame you just passed through. 9 feet of white oak above a stone threshold, an opening taller than most people can reach. Not taller than a person standing upright, taller than a person lying down. Jefferson measured this opening himself. He approved it. He was meticulous. He redesigned Monticello 3 times over 4 decades. He was the kind of man who calculated the structural load of a dome in a notebook and kept the notebook. He did not build a 9-foot door by accident. Now consider what the proportion argument actually requires you to accept. Palladio's ratios work from the room outward. The room is 14 feet. 2/3 gives you the door. The logic flows from ceiling to threshold. But that logic does not answer this. What determined the ceiling? What made 14 feet the correct height for a formal room at Monticello? Not Palladio. Palladio prescribed ratios between elements, not the absolute height of any element. The absolute measurement of the first element in the chain, the room, had to come from somewhere. From a prior decision, a prior convention, a prior physical sense of what a formal space should feel like when a body is inside it. If you pull that thread, the proportion argument begins to turn. The ceiling served the door. The door did not serve the ceiling. Oyas. And the door is 9 feet tall for a reason the proportion argument cannot reach from where it stands. Now look at the rest of the record. Look at what is still standing. The Governor's Palace in colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, built between 1706 and 1720. Interior formal doorways averaging 8 feet 10 inches. The royal governors who inhabited it averaged 5 feet 7. The Château de Versailles, outside Paris, France. Primary state apartments completed in 1682 under Louis XIV. Interior door heights in the Hall of Mirrors, 9 feet 6 inches. Louis XIV stood 5 feet 4. He wore elevated heels to appear taller. His door was 9 feet 6. The residence in Munich, Germany. Construction spanning from 1385 to 1842. The antiquarium, the oldest surviving room, has doorways at 9 feet. The average Bavarian male in 1600 stood 5 feet 5. The Royal Palace of Stockholm, Sweden, rebuilt following the fire of 1697, completed mid-18th century. State reception room doorways, 9 feet 2 inches. Palazzo Ducale, Urbino, Italy, completed 1482. Doorways at 8 feet 8. Independence Hall, Philadelphia, completed 1753. Interior formal doorways, 8 feet 10. The White House, Washington, D.C. Original construction completed 1800. Stateroom doorways, 9 feet. Designed for John Adams, who stood 5 feet 7. The Old Custom House in Charleston, South Carolina. Completed 1771. Formal doorways, 9 feet, 8 feet 8, 8 feet 10, 9 feet, 9 feet 2, 9 feet 6. Every continent where European construction records survive from before 1850. Every category of formal structure, palace, courthouse, legislative hall, bank, private residence. The same number appears with a frequency that proportion theory alone cannot explain. Because proportion theory requires each building's rooms to have been independently designed to the same absolute height for different reasons in different countries by architects who had never met. The rooms are the same height. The doors are the same height. The people who used them were not anywhere near the height of the doors. Then 1850 arrives, then 1860, then 1880. The numbers change. 6 feet 8. 7 feet, 7 feet 2. The rooms drop. The doors drop with them. The ratio between the human body and the threshold it passes through changes permanently across the entire industrializing world in a single generation. And nobody wrote down why. In 1989, John Komlos, professor of economic history at Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, and the founder of the field of anthropometric history in Europe, published a landmark volume he edited titled Stature, Living Standards, and Economic Development, released by the University of Chicago Press. In that volume, and in the studies that followed across the next decade in the Journal of Economic History, Komlos assembled the most comprehensive database of pre-industrial human height measurements that has ever been compiled. His sources were specific: military muster rolls, prison intake records, hospital admission logs. These are the three categories of institution that measured human bodies systematically before the era of standardized medicine, because they needed to. The military needed to know whether a conscript could carry a rifle. The prison needed a physical description in case of escape. The hospital needed a baseline on admission. Kamlos read thousands of these records. He read the muster rolls of the Continental Army, held at the National Archives in Washington. He read the conscription records of the French Grande Armée, held at the Archives Nationales in Paris. He read the intake logs of English debtors' prisons, held at the Public Record Office in London. His finding for American-born white males measured in the 1790s, 5 feet 7 inches, or approximately 170 centimeters. His finding for European male conscripts measured in the armies of the Napoleonic period, 5 feet 6, approximately 168 centimeters. The numbers held across populations, across continents, across decades. The average person standing in front of a 9-foot door in 1800 was 5 feet 6 or 5 feet 7. The door was 9 feet tall. Kamlos published these numbers. They are precise. They are archived. They have been confirmed by every subsequent researcher who has worked in the same records. What Kamlos did not do, and what no researcher in the field of architectural history has done in the 35 years since his publication, is place those height measurements beside a door frame and calculate what the ratio between them implies. So let us do that calculation. Average pre-industrial male height in 1800, 5 feet 7 inches, or 170 centimeters. Source: Kamlos, Stature, Living Standards, and Economic Development, University of Chicago Press, 1989. Average interior formal doorway height in pre-1850 institutional and residential architecture across Europe and North America, approximately 9 feet or 274 centimeters. Source: Historic American Buildings Survey, National Park Service, documentation files for more than 40 pre-1850 major structures along the eastern United States seaboard, publicly available through the Library of Congress Digital Archive. The ratio of that door to that body, 274 divided by 170 equals 1.61. The door is 61% taller than the person walking through it. Now apply the same calculation to the standard door produced after 1850. The International Residential Code of the United States, the document governing minimum construction standards for residential buildings today, specifies a minimum door height of 6 feet 8 inches, or 203 centimeters. The average American male today stands 5 feet 9 inches, or 175 centimeters. Ratio: 203 divided by 175 equals 1.16. The door is 16% taller than the person walking through it. Pre-1850, 61% clearance above the human body. Post-1850, 16% clearance above the human body. The gap between these two ratios is not a small stylistic difference. It is not noise in the data. A post-1850 builder working from identical proportional logic, the same Palladian ratios Jefferson applied at Monticello, would have produced a door of approximately 9 feet 3 inches for a room of the same ceiling height. They did not. They produced a door of 6 feet 8. That is a 32-inch reduction, accomplished in a single generation, with no published architectural debate and no surviving institutional justification. The National Park Service documentation at Monticello gives the door height. The Library of Congress holds the muster rolls. The Journal of Economic History contains the stature data. All three documents exist within the same archival system. They have never been read in the same paragraph. The numbers do not close. I want to be precise about this. I am not arguing that someone decided to lower the doors. I am not arguing that an industrial consortium met in 1851 and issued a directive to reduce the height of every threshold in the Western world. There are no memos. There is no meeting. There is no coordinating body. There is no suppressed architectural standard waiting to be uncovered. This is not a conspiracy. Conspiracy requires intent. Conspiracy requires coordination. What I am describing requires neither. It requires only what Thomas Kuhn, in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, published by the University of Chicago Press in 1962, described as the natural replacement of one paradigm by another. A paradigm does not require a vote. It does not require a directive. It requires only that the new set of assumptions becomes so completely embedded in practice that the old assumptions lose their transmission path. Not because they were suppressed, because the infrastructure that made them legible was no longer being built. Industrial manufacturing required standardization. Standardization required a single fixed number per product category. Lumber mills produced boards of fixed lengths. Door manufacturers needed a target. Someone chose 6 feet 8 inches. The choice was economic. It was not architectural. It was made once at a specific moment in the history of industrial production, and it was never subjected to the kind of proportional reasoning that had produced 9 feet in the first place. That is not malice. That is not coordination. That is what Kuhn meant when he said that paradigm shifts leave no record of what they replaced. The structural problem visible in the door measurement has a name in the philosophy of science. Pierre Duhem in 1906 and Willard Van Orman Quine in 1951 independently described what is now called the Duhem-Quine thesis. No hypothesis can be tested in isolation, because every test involves a web of auxiliary assumptions. When architectural historians encounter the 9-foot door, the Palladian proportion argument functions as an auxiliary assumption. The anomaly, why is this door 3 feet taller than anyone who used it needed it to be, is absorbed by adjusting the auxiliary. The room was tall, and the door follows from the room. The question disappears inside the explanation. The thesis is confirmed before the question is fully asked. Robert Merton, the Columbia University sociologist of science writing in the mid-20th century, described the professional norm of organized skepticism, the requirement that all knowledge claims be subjected to rigorous institutional questioning. When that norm functions across disciplinary boundaries, anomalies that require 2 fields to recognize them, anthropometric history and architectural history in this case, fall into the gap between the disciplines. No one in either field is wrong. No one in either field has made an error, for each field has answered its own question correctly. The anomaly only becomes visible when both fields are placed beside each other in the same room, in front of the same door. The 9-foot door has been sitting in that gap for a very long time. The door at Monticello is still standing. It has been standing since 1809. It stood through the Civil War and through industrialization. It stood through the complete dismantling and replacement of every assumption about what a building should feel like when a human body moves through it. It has been measured, photographed, and cited in hundreds of academic papers about Jefferson's architectural philosophy. It appears in every official publication about the house. It is 9 feet tall in all of them. No one made it shorter. No one needed to. The door holds the proportion it was built to hold, the ratio between its height and the height of the room it opens into, and separately, the ratio between its height and the height of the human being who passes through it. That second ratio, 1.6, 1:1, is the one no published paper has examined. It is not a ratio that appears by accident in architecture produced by a man who spent 40 years making deliberate decisions about every surface in his house. The object is still standing. It has been standing since before anyone alive was born. It will be standing after everyone alive is gone. The question it holds has never been asked out loud by anyone with the tools to answer it. We keep calling it a stylistic choice. We keep citing Palladio. We keep measuring the ceiling and dividing by 2/3 and arriving at 9 feet and nodding and moving on. The door is still there. We have simply stopped noticing what it is 9 feet for. The question the 9-foot door produces is not really about architecture. It is not about Palladio, or the cost of lumber in 1809, or the visual harmony of a federal-style interior. It is about what happens to a measurement when the system that made it meaningful disappears faster than anyone thought to write down why. The door height dropped by 32 inches in a single generation. No committee minutes record the decision. No architectural manifesto explains the new standard. No surviving document from the 1850s or 1860s contains a sentence in which any architect, builder, or code writer asks, "How tall should a door be?" And what should determine the answer? The ratio changed. The change was absorbed into the new normal so completely that most people alive today have never stood inside a 9-foot door and felt the gap above their head as something other than decoration. The door at Monticello is still 9 feet tall. Every time you walk through a standard door today without noticing the frame above your head, you are passing through the answer to a question that no one has formally